Yo, what up? Welcome to Free Refills Podcast, where we come together as youth leaders to discuss the realities of leading in youth ministry. Our hope is that you leave refilled, refueled, and re-energized to lead and carry on in youth ministry. I'm your host, Boss, coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm joined by my co-host, Dusty.
What's up?
Coming to you from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Each episode, we have a special guest join us in our conversation, and today we have two, which is awesome. We've got Lynn. Lynn, say hello.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
And Lynn, you're coming to us from Reno, correct?
Beautiful Reno, Nevada.
Awesome. And we got AJ. AJ, say what's up.
Hey, what's up, everyone? What's up?
Who's also coming from Tulsa, Oklahoma.
That's it.
That's it. Hey, how about we go around the table, so to speak. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you located? We've kind of already revealed that. And tell us about your family, how long you've been in youth ministry. We'll start there.
Well, AJ here. I have been in ministry going on my 12th year, but I'm only 32. So I was blessed very much from the Lord to be able to jump into ministry very young. And so hopefully I've gained a little wisdom since then. But yeah, it's been at my current church for going on 7 years, and
Wow.
and married to my high school sweetheart. Got 2 boys, 2 years old, 5 months old. So we're living the dream, not getting any sleep, but it is well worth it.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right,
Lynn.
guys. Hey, this is Lynn. As Boss said, I am coming to you from beautiful Reno, Nevada. I have been in youth ministry for, I think it's about 30 years now. So I'm a gray beard, man.
Nice.
I'm married. Like AJ, I married my high school sweetheart. And so if
Yeah.
you're in youth ministry, you know that is a two-edged sword, because every couple in your high school group is like, we're going to be just like you two.
Yes.
They thought.
Yeah. So I've been here at Hope Community in Reno, Nevada for about 14 years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we always, with our guests, we always ask them some questions just to give, we understand the ministry and life background that you guys just gave us. We want to kind of give maybe a little broader context of things that you might like. So we always ask the same questions, and one of you guys can take it first, but we'd love to hear from both of you is, what is something, like your favorite drink that is your go-to? What is your favorite drink? And if it is a Starbucks drink or some kind of like really like fancy coffee kind of, like, I want to know, which I already gonna know AJ's, but like I want to know, like, what is your order if it's like from Starbucks?
Dusty thinks he knows mine. Look, if I'm going to Starbucks, I want the holiday drinks, okay?
I
want
do
that
know
pumpkin
that.
spice latte. I want the peppermint mocha when the time is right. So yeah, I love those things, but bottom line is fuel me up with coffee. It doesn't matter if it's one of those. It doesn't matter if it's black. I wasn't much of a coffee drinker, and I went on a mission trip to Guatemala, and woke up one morning and the kids wanted us to play as early as 6 a.m. I didn't have any kids, so that was super early for me. And so I asked our cook, I said, hey, can I get some coffee, and do you have any creamer? And he looked at me and laughed in my face, because you're an orphanage in Guatemala. And he's like, no, we don't have any creamer. And so I started drinking black coffee on that trip, came home, fell in love with coffee, and the rest is history.
I feel like everybody always has a black coffee story of what switched them from creamer to like having heavy creamer to like black coffee. Yeah. There's always somebody that has a story. That's really
because
good, though.
No one just wakes up drinking black coffee. No one.
Someone's forced into that life for sure. All right, Lynn, what about you?
Hey, okay, I've heard you ask this question a number of times, and like any other listener, you're listening and you're thinking like, how am I going to answer that? Okay, I'm a big coconut water guy, love coconut water, but if we're going to go coffee, got to go with a good, strong Cuban coffee.
Mm. What kind, when you say Cuban, like what's your favorite? What's your favorite?
What do they call it? It's cafe de leche?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm that guy. I'm cream and sugar.
Yeah, well, I'm with you. What's something maybe you've read this year, as we're about to start talking about our topic of being like 2020 in review, like something you read this year, or something that you're you have read in the past that you would recommend for a listener in youth ministry?
You know, I got to say, Bob Goff's books are fantastic. So I definitely would recommend Bob Goff's books. I did get the Mike DeVito and Lucas Ramirez book, Design for More. I based a whole series on it, which I thought was pretty cool. And then right now, I'm really enjoying the Greg and Vaughn book, Jesus Revolution.
So who is that by?
Jesus Revolution by Greg Laurie and Ellen Vaughn.
That's nice. Okay, good.
Yeah, kind of taking it back to that Jesus people movement of the 70s.
Yeah. Well, we'll put that in the notes so that people can go find those. AJ, what about you?
Yeah, our staff just read a book called Free to Believe by Luke Goodrich. This is a book about religious liberties, which it starts off talking about how there's really kind of three people going into religious liberties. One that is very much, we have to have them no matter what. One that says we have to be martyrs no matter what. And then the one in the middle that's kind of like, it doesn't really affect me, so I don't think about it much. And that was me going into reading this book. But this is actually from a lawyer who has gone into a lot of court cases in regards to religious liberty. And he just kind of expands on what is the biblical way to look at religious liberties and how does that cultivate our heart in the way that we respond to government, the way we respond to politicians and those things. And so not to get political, but it was a great book because it made me think about things that when you're hanging out with teenagers all the time, you just don't think about. And so, but as a pastor, it is something to think about and to, ask the Holy Spirit, like, Lord, guide me in the way that I'm thinking about such things and the way that made me care about these things, because these are important things to care about. So it was good for me just because it made me think about something that has never been on my radar before.
Awesome. Hey, so this is funny. What is the craziest thing that you bought online in 2020? While you're thinking, this is why I asked this question. We were only like 2 weeks into like quarantine when Oklahoma got locked down, and I bought a jump online that would fit. I've measured my living room out to like height and width, and I found like a specific jump with a slide that fit in my living room so that my kids could get energy out.
Hey, that's pretty cool. So in January we did a series that is basically talking about like controlling your mouth and stuff, and we love stage props and stuff. And so I think it was 2020. I think it was January 2020 where I bought a bunch of the wind up chattering teeth. And then I bought a giant mouth inflatable. So it's like lips and teeth and everything. It's a giant inflatable that you like lay on in the pool. And we just blew it up and stuck it right on the back of the stage as it's a series called Watch Your Mouth. And so we did that. We had the chattering teeth all along the stage. And so it was kind of weird to order just a bunch of mouth products from Amazon.
Yeah, I would say so. Lynn, what about you?
Man, I am not nearly as fun as you guys. I think the most interesting thing was probably an old-fashioned bingo set.
Really?
Yeah, I was thinking like
the spinner?
Yeah, the spinner, the balls, the car. I was like, maybe we'll try bingo with the kids this year. It'll be like, who knows?
Yeah. Let's go back. Let's go all the way back to the originals,
Yeah.
That's good. Well, hey, like I said, we just wanted to ask us some fun questions of like, help people give you, some kind of context to who you are and stuff like that. So anyway, we'll move into our topic today.
Yeah. Cause like, speaking of crazy, 2020 has been crazy. It's been a ride. That's just like the least that you could say about the year. I don't think it was anything. Well, I know it wasn't anything anybody expected. We all of us had 2020 vision campaigns that we were rolling out, and we were like, this is how it's going to go. It's going to be amazing. And then March hit, and then it started to all unravel. And in all of that, vision got blurry, all that sort of stuff. We weren't sure what was going to happen. We weren't sure if we were going to be in it for 2 weeks, 4 weeks. We had no idea, and we're still here in it. everybody's experiencing it differently, but depending on where you're at in the country, which is unique. And it's fascinating that we get to sit in this space and be able to talk about those things, which is what we want to do. But I also want to remind us that, and I have to remind myself this, that God wasn't surprised by it. He saw it all happening. He was sitting outside of it, watching it, and he's still been working. He never stopped. He never got quarantined. He never got shut down or canceled, none of that. And for us, like, we have to allow ourselves to let go of what we hoped for, and then allow God to reveal what it is that he's showing to us where we're planted right now. And so the opportunities are endless when we start to see it that way. So that's why we invited both of you here, because we heard about you from our team that y'all were crushing it in some way. Like I said before, it's in some way somebody saw something in you and went, they're doing it. When we think of somebody that we want to hear from about the year in review, these are the guys. And so that's why you're here. So today we're just going to really kind of talk about the year, talk about, like, go in review. Let's talk about some highs and lows, things like that. Maybe, and really like what we learned about ourselves, because I think if anything, that's where we really need to focus on in order for ministry to continue, because we've got to go back here. We can't blame it on somebody else. We've got to take a hold of it ourselves. So
I think what's important when we talk about like 2020 through the lens of like ourselves, it allows whoever's going to listen to this to go, hey, I've had that same thought too. And it gives, like, when you hear someone finally just fess up about a high or a low, it gives people the freedom to go, hey, like, it's okay for me to think that, right? It's okay for me to celebrate that. It's okay for me to celebrate my low as something that could become a high for me down the road. So yeah, we sit on there and we become as vulnerable as possible when we give you guys the freedom to do so. But I think just starting off the top, like, I think it's super easy, like, middle school, small groups, like, hey, what are your highs and lows for the week? But the thing is, we're asking, like, what's your high and low for the year? And I think if we just start like off the top, it's our go-to is to talk about ministry. So what if we shift and go like, hey, what's your, like, been like your highs and lows for your personal, like what you've learned and like about yourself in 2020?
If I could you guys, so my son was a senior last year.
okay.
So like most student ministry pastors, I really think of the year in terms of, the school year, but it had a special twist because it was my son's senior year. And so as the year began, the school year, we had football season, and he plays football. We have one of the top programs in the state here at DeMonte Ranch High School, and he's on the team. And it started out spectacularly with that, and then going into the holidays, and everything was great. And then, like you referenced earlier, March hit, and it became very real and very personal, because it's one thing when you're the student ministry pastor and you see the kids struggling at church or via Teams or Zoom or whatever, FaceTime, but it's a different thing when you go home and you're actually seeing the toll that the pandemic is taking on your own kid, and so it was when we went to full distance learning, it was only supposed to be a couple of weeks, just quash the curve, and then he started losing classes, and then the spring sports got canceled, and he was really bummed by that. And fortunately, his school got to have prom. They were the first school in the district to have prom. We're watching all these other schools not have prom, not have the baseball season, track, lacrosse, softball, that all fell by the wayside. And I see him getting more and more depressed. And that gave me a great insight to what the other kids were going through as well. Because it's one thing to text or talk to a kid and they tell you, yeah, man, I'm doing fine. And you're like, okay, good. You check that box, talk to so-and-so, and they're doing fine. But then when I started thinking of it in terms of like, well, if one of the other leaders was asking my son how he's doing, he would say fine. But I know he's not doing fine. And so it gave me this great insight to what these kids were really struggling with and how to minister to them. What my son needed, I knew these other people needed too. So the pandemic became like a real personal thing as a student ministries pastor, if that makes sense.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So For me, the high is easy. We had our second son in June. And so that was, it was interesting just because there was that unknown of how that was going to work. Thankfully, my wife was able to deliver, and I was able to be a part of that at the hospital before things got too crazy and they began to set stricter boundaries. But we were actually, she was rolled into a COVID room because all the other rooms were taken. So she gave birth to our second son in one of those COVID rooms that had like the zipper on the door. And so like I was taking pictures because I was like, this is kind of cool. Like I want to remember this. And so of course she wasn't too fond of all that. But anyway, so the high is easy. The high is my boy Austin was born. But my low, I think for me, it is ministry related, but it is personal. I'm so thankful for where the Lord has placed me. But this summer, I was faced twice with being a part of making a decision on whether or not a camp happens. And that was hard. It was a hard pill to swallow because my decision or vote, really, if you will, determined whether or not a camp was going to happen. And the heaviness of, knowing my seniors and them missing out on something and things like that, the outcomes of those things are irrelevant. That's not what the low was, but the low is simply having to be asked individually to me, AJ, as a part of this team, what is the Holy Spirit telling you? And for me to voice, here is what my vote is on whether or not this thing happens. And both times right before those meetings happened, I remember being sick to my stomach, genuinely sick to my stomach, thinking hundreds, for one of the camps, thousands of students are going to be affected by the decision I'm making right now. Even though my decision was one of a handful, it could be a difference maker, one of which it was. We were split 13-12 on the decision of whether or not to have that camp. And I got to the day of before I really made my decision and following where the Holy Spirit was leading me. So all that to say, the low is just being put in a position that COVID put me in that I never expected to be in, and thinking like, Lord, what if I choose the wrong one? And hindsight, I don't think in either position the wrong decision's been made. The Lord protected both decisions, but it was tough. It really was.
I would say something that AJ just said, and I think that, Lynn, you felt like personally in your home, was that 2020 made each one of us really feel decisions. Like you started to feel those. I think ones that we just made naturally, ones that just came to us when we just were like, this is what we just do. All of a sudden you were like, but can we? Like, can we do this? If someone takes a picture here, is this going to harm us? And it led you to have more conversations about things that you've never had to talk about, which gives you so much more emotional stress that I don't think anybody's really highlighted, at least through the year, is just like the emotional stress that you've had to like sit with. And I think I've been talking to some teachers, and teachers, I think, feel this too. I talked to one teacher, she pulled up into my church parking lot just to like have a conversation. And she just said, I asked her how she was doing it. And her response was, I just don't know if we're doing what's right or what's wrong anymore. Like, I don't know what's right and what's wrong for these students. Because she's like, we're in class, and all of a sudden your class of 30 is now a class of 15. And you know that they're all either contract trace or they just given up on school and they're just at home. And you just go, is this okay that they're here? And then like, where are they? Are they eating? Are they like all of this emotional stress that that this teacher haven't? And I said, you know what? It's almost like the same thing. And like for a moment, I go, I feel that, because it's like, if we are open our doors, we're wrong. If we close our doors, we're wrong. It's like, no matter what we do, we're wrong. And I think that is like been the undertone of 2020, is like, we can't be right at all.
Right. I just want to say to our listeners, you youth pastor, youth leader, you that are listening, I want you to know that if you cried multiple times in 2020, you're not alone. Okay. I'm right there with you. I've cried more times in ministry this year than I think I did 10 years prior. So you're not alone in that.
Okay, so lean into that a little bit. Not necessarily like let's talk about you crying, but what revealed in you in that? Like what did you start like when you're out of that now and you're looking back at
Yeah.
it, you're like, man, what came up in those moments and what has been exposed in you? Because this time has been the great exposure to everything. And so like, yeah. So talk about yourself.
Yeah. So for sure. So for me, it was one of the things that was exposed was the amount of influence the Lord has blessed me with. And I try to say that as humbly as possible.
Sure.
But it's almost like sometimes you can take that for granted. You don't realize what the Lord's given you and the opportunities he's given you. And in that moment, in those moments, the tears were from like, Lord, I can't believe that you're allowing me to be a part of this conversation, the part of this decision making. And now I actually have to make a decision that is going to impact my seniors to not go to a camp or to go to a camp. And is that okay? And for me, it was an emotion of thankfulness. Like, Lord, thank you for trusting me with this. But then those tears of like, take this cup from me. Like, and not to be dramatic about it, but like, it was heart-wrenching to know like I could be the one taking this away from the seniors. My decision to take this away from them. And like, if they knew that, how would my seniors feel about me? Like, that was heartbreaking to me. Makes me emotional now.
Yeah.
Think about what they missed out on and that I had to be a part of the decision-making to keep them safe or to allow that thing to happen. And, but at the same time, the good side of that is I think it has humbled me as a youth pastor to say, it's not about the events. It's not about if our doors are open or not. It's about the relationship. And it kind of takes you back to where it needs to be. And regardless of if this camp happens or not, regardless of having service or how many are showing up, I love when Lynn talked about he said, if my son got asked this by another leader, he would not say I'm okay. Or he would say he was okay, but I know he's not. And I love that because that's true. And so how would I have those conversations to say, brother, sister, student, I know you're not okay, and that's okay. You know, I want us to unpack that. I want you to know you're not alone. And how do we pull back those layers from them outside of the events and outside of the cancel culture and all of that? How do we pull back all those layers to say, I love you, you're not alone? It was interesting to fight through all that.
Yeah. I think that's one of the downsides, I think, of youth ministry is that it's always somebody's senior year, that every single year is somebody's senior year, and you make a decision and it comes back of this ruined my senior year. But we have the privilege, the honor, the cross to bear, if you will, to help lead them through that. Possibly even when we're leading ourselves through this pandemic of things being canceled. Lynn, speak on this from your vantage point of being somebody who's been in a youth ministry role for 30 years, that you're like, I mean, probably nothing similar to this ever along the way, but maybe there's some things that have popped up along the way. You're like, hey, we're coming back to some of this.
You know, I was thinking that in preparing for today, you know, I had a great conversation with Dusty, and I've been thinking a lot about the history of the church and the fact that the church has had to overcome a lot of crazy things. You know, you look at like what the church was during the Roman era and how it had to overcome such persecution, and the Middle Ages and the Inquisitions and wars and diseases and pandemics. I mean, the church has had to overcome things on a continual basis. And so at dinner a couple nights ago, I was talking about this podcast and this opportunity with my family. My daughter's a junior in college, the University of Nevada, and she really corrected me because I went negative right away. You know, and AJ, I appreciate your honesty talking about, you know, you've cried more in ministry this year than you have in 13 years. For me, it's been more anger this year than I've ever had. And, you know, she looked at me and she's like, you know, Dad, maybe you're looking at it the wrong way. Maybe this year, 2020, has been an awesome opportunity for the church to identify some things that we need to change. And maybe we need to embrace what has come our way instead of just being negative about it. And I'm sitting there at the dining room table like, oh man, preach it. Yes, thank you. That is fantastic stuff.
It.
Yeah. Good job, Dad. You're doing it.
I can't take credit for that. I can't. So yeah, you know, the things that we've had to overcome this year, they're not going to go anywhere. I love that AJ brought up relationships, and that was something I was really hoping we could dive into today. The importance, we think about programming and curriculum and calendars and budgets. We have all these things that as youth pastors, we spend so much time on.
Yep.
What it really boils down to is just sitting down next to Johnny and saying, Johnny, how are you? Molly, what's new with you? How's your heart today?
Yeah, I think I had a conversation with the youth pastor who was just really like concerned with like why her students were, or why their students weren't coming back. And it was just like they were struggling with like wrapping their mind around it. And I remembered something that I heard through, I think, one of these conversations in a podcast. And they said that, upon your return, depending on what state you're in, whatever that looks like, to return back to like near normal, where it would have been like you're opening your doors again and people are, kids are coming to your building. It's a great opportunity for you to gauge your emotional equity and relational equity that you had in students before a pandemic. And this is why in our network here in Tulsa, we constantly are talking about we need to be proactive in relationships, not just with our students, but with each other before crisis happens. Because if we wait till crisis happens, nobody has time in crisis to develop relationship. And so it's like, at that point, we're like, when we think that we need a relationship in the middle of crisis, we do, but we needed it before. We just took it for advantage. And so it's like, I think that that's something that is really good to be leaning into is, really look at that. I don't know who's listening to this and wherever you're at, but upon your return or what that looks like, maybe we go from here to be more invested in less in program, but more in like, how do we be relational?
Yeah, I mean, to speak on the network side of it, and particularly right before, so one of the camps did not happen. One of the camps did this summer for us, and the one that happened was hosted at our church. Wrong, right, indifferent, doesn't matter, but it happened. Okay, and so we hosted it at our church. Dusty was there, and some of our network was there. But I remember the week before, I was in a conversation with one of the guys from our network who his church was not meeting. They were not doing events. They had no summer planning, no summer programming. And they said, we will not have any summer programming. Again, wrong, right, and different doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is we still could be there with each other. And what was crazy is we felt the exact same way for two completely different reasons. I was in tears and worried and nervous for this camp that was happening because we were having programming, and he was heartbroken and nervous and with tears because he wasn't seeing his kids and his students. And yet, even though our ministries were going about this whole thing differently, because of the network, the two of us could be there for each other. And it wasn't about you're doing it wrong, we're doing it right, I wish I were you. None of that. It was all about, brother, let me pray for you. Let's just pour into each other. And it was late at night one night, we just got to talking, and it got deep. And it was a really cool conversation to have, because he said, you know what, even though we're not doing programming and you are, man, I'm praying for you because I know how heavy your heart is. And then going into that last meeting right before we had the camp, Dusty was there. He could talk about it. Some of us almost in tears at that meeting, because it was like, it's now or never. If we're doing it, we're cutting checks tomorrow. And if we're not, now's like, this has to be the day that we call it. We're looking at each other. Honestly, some of us kind of with fear. I'm just being real. We were looking at each other with fear in our eyes going like, this is, if something happens, this is going to be hard, but we just have to follow the Spirit's lead in this. And we did it. Thankfully, the Lord protected our camp. But again, that's irrelevant to the conversation. The bottom line is I felt comfortable being in that room, making that conversation with Dusty, with the rest of the guys in the network that was going to do that camp together. Almost like we kind of called it COVID camp, because it was thrown together last minute because all of our plans got canceled. But what was neat is in that last meeting to make that decision of whether or not this happens, regardless of the decision we made, it was awesome to sit in a room saying, I trust all of these guys and their opinions and where the Holy Spirit is leading them, because of the relationships, going back to what Dusty said, because of the relationships that were established long before COVID came along. Now I can sit in a room and make a decision like this and trust the words coming from the mouths of all of these leaders because of the relationships that we had before we entered this room.
Wow, man, AJ, that's some powerful stuff. Thanks for sharing. You know, AJ used a word that if we could just discuss for a couple minutes, I would really be appreciative. You know, we talked about fear.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, 2020, I've experienced more fear in ministry than any other year in ministry.
How so? Keep going. Keep talking
Oh
about
man, I mean, just day to day for one thing. I mean, I'm sitting in our youth group room right now. We call it the upper room. It's in the upstairs at our church, Hope Community, and just a week to week, day to day type of fear with regard to the virus. Are we doing enough? Did I deodorize? Are the kids wearing their masks? So there's that level of fear. And then, you know, as AJ's unpacking the camp situation down there in Tulsa with Dusty, you know, I'm thinking about like our camp. We got to have one of our 2 summer camps, the high school one, not the middle school one. And, you know, there was a great degree of fear there. Anytime we have any type of event, I mean, when my wife, who is in charge of our music team program for the student ministry here, you know, when she has practice, I'm concerned. They're singing, so they're vocalizing, and you know that spray's coming out, which we know is a very, very high likelihood of the virus being spread.
Sure.
It's just a constant fear. You know, I think one of you guys mentioned pictures. Early on, I posted a couple pictures when we started meeting in person again, and I immediately got feedback. Oh, we see people that aren't 6 feet apart. We see people that aren't wearing their masks in those pictures. I'm like, oh man. Oh, so just, yeah, this constant fear of doing the right thing.
Is that new? Is that new for you, Lynn, or has this been some, like, not necessarily new as the fear, but is that something that has come to the top in the forefront where you're like recognizing that in yourself, or has that been something that you've lived with all your life?
All right. Once again, 30-year graybeard speaking here.
Sure.
I mean, youth ministry is about some pretty crazy things.
It is.
You know, we feed kids goofy stuff and then they throw up.
Right.
The goofy games and somebody gets hurt. I remember steal the bacon in the church basement in Colorado.
Yep.
And a girl broke her tailbone. I mean, you know, we've all got those types of things. So yeah, fear has long been a minor component. Yeah, you know, you got to, safety is job number one when you're working with middle school, high school kids or younger kids. But no, I would say, boss, to answer the question, this is different. This is very different.
I think what's interesting, Lynn, is that you made a point about fear, but like something that was minor every other year is major in 2020. And I think that that's another thing about 2020 that is it's exposed these minor things that we've had, that we've thought about, but we didn't waste much time with, have now exposed itself to be like, oh man. And I think the whole fear, man, is really interesting. AJ, do you have like the take on fear? Because I saw you nod at it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, those things, you know, go without saying. Absolutely, Lynn. I'm right there in the seat next to you with all of those same things. But, you know, some of the other areas for me was, and I think every youth pastor leader experiences, is there came a point within, since March to now, there's come a point to where we have understood that what's happening is going to expose whether or not what I've been doing is been the right thing, you know. And
really good.
You begin to question your vision. You begin to question how you do ministry. You begin to question, were we too events based? Were we relational enough? And so you start to question yourself and say, you know, was what I was doing, is that going to sustain us through a pandemic? You know, and then it's like, are they coming back or not? You know, and when we do meet again, what is that going to look like? Who's going to return? And all of that. And so whatever the answer is, I think for me, the Lord has blessed me to see a lot of places to say, okay, that has helped us sustain our ministry. And so we know that has to be a staple of what we do. But then there's been other areas where the Lord has shown me, yeah, you spent a lot of time on this, bud, and it didn't really matter. You know, when a pandemic hit, that got thrown out the window real fast. And so I think for me, the fear was to just be honest, to be transparent. It's going to make me emotional, The fear was, this is going to show me if I'm a good youth pastor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was hard because I didn't know how to answer that question going through everything and being quarantined and meeting on Zoom and starting, that first month. I'm sure all of you felt this. That first month, you're hitting like 90% maybe of your regular attendance because all the kids are like, yeah, let's get on there. Then by like, 2 or 3 months later, I'm like at 20%. And I'm like, where are my students? And then you're questioning your ability as a student pastor. You lay in bed at night thinking, am I going to end up on the other side of this, back in the workforce and not doing ministry? To my brothers and sisters listening, and that was you, my heart goes to you because I know how much that hurts. And I know I thank the Lord that he did not plan that for me. And I didn't wind up on the other side of that, but I have so many friends who wound up on the other side. And it's maybe for them, it wasn't, they were a bad youth pastor. It was simply the pandemic hit them differently than it hit others. And youth pastor, youth leader who you've got a different job than you thought 2020 was going to give you. My heart goes to you, and we are praying for you diligently because I know that's tough. I know that stuff.
I think this fear, the other side of this fear is that when this fear starts to creep in and you start to have to ask yourself hard questions like, this is going to show me if I'm good at being a youth pastor, that you start to trust yourself and others less very quickly. And I think that we start to second guess our choices. We start to second guess the vision that we feel like, is this really from God? Am I supposed to be doing this at all? Like I've talked to some youth pastors who are going like, I don't even want to do this anymore. That 2020 has completely taken their whole heart from ministry and has completely severed ties. They weren't let go because of budgets or being a bad youth pastor. They just got burnt out. 2020 burnt them out so bad that they just don't want it anymore. And I think about all the students that are just going to like lose that person. Right. And that's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking that I've in 2020, I had to sit across the table from two different youth pastors who just said, I just don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm just done. And they were like, I'd rather just go work at Walmart. And sadly, like I remember that weight when I was a teacher. I was just like, just a Walmart greeter, like right now sounds so good, like, but, and there's nothing against that. And there's nothing against like the stickers that they give my kids when they walk in that makes my kids feel good. But like, we have that same duty that we have to remember that we are part of the way bigger picture in eternity than 2020. And 2020 is a year that can that can define eternity for a lot of students and a lot of people and adults that are going through this too. I mean, 80%, probably even 90% of parents don't know how to lead their kids through this. I mean, Lynn just shared that, like personally, and he's the youth pastor leading multiple, groups of kids. And I was like, I don't know how to lead the one at home, so it's like, it's heavy that this fear creeps in of just like, maybe I just don't know who I am anymore. Like, I don't know. I've had people second guess their faith in this time. Like, what is this, and I think there's this, that Lynn, I appreciate you for bringing up like fear, because that's a real thing.
I think, this year's been a revealer, and COVID has forced that on us. And maybe if nothing else, it's made us realize about ourselves, like we don't know as much as we thought we know. We don't know how to handle as much as we thought we could. Or at some point we just go, we don't know for everything. We don't know. And I think that's a healthy spot, though. That's a healthy spot for us to get. It's humbling to say that, I don't know, but it helps us lean on somebody else when we live in that, and we can say that out loud to another person. This goes, I don't know, I've never done this before. Like I, as a father, have never parented a 16-month-old. This is my first time. So I'm trying to figure it out. in the midst of a pandemic. Like all of us are doing in the midst of a pandemic. So none of us have done this before. AJ, you're a parent for the second time, for the first time, for the second time, or however you want to. You've never had a second kid before. Here you are. And so I think all of that to say is like, when we can get to that spot and say, you know, I don't know, but we're going to figure it out, and we're going to figure out what's best. And we're going to have to lay down at night knowing that, like, I think that was the best decisions for today, and we'll make the decisions tomorrow when they come.
Isn't that part of the fear though? The fear that we as adults or we as youth pastors can't, like, the fear of saying, I don't know.
100%.
Like,
yeah.
Does that expose me? Kind of like, does, if a student asks me, like, and I just say, I just don't know. Like I feel like we kind of like live in this world that we have to feel like we know the answers. Like people are looking to us to know the answers. And when we say we don't know, sometimes we realize that's the best answer for them.
Right.
Is to realize that, hey, the person that I think knows everything maybe doesn't. And I'm not alone because I don't know. Like, there's no fakeness there. And go ahead.
Because I think with that, like you had mentioned students, right? Like we teach kids to go talk to an adult, and we go ask an adult because they'll know. But we as adults, when you get to adulthood, you're like, but I don't know. Like when a kid comes and asks me a question, what am I supposed to say to them if I don't, and the same thing goes for peer to peer. Like, I don't know, but we're going to figure it out and we're going to go with it. Go ahead, Lynn.
Well, I think that there's two thoughts that come to mind with that. The first is that we're supposed to be the people who know. And so admitting that you don't know, it is scary, but it also takes me to the second thing, which is that it really hammers home the importance of networking.
Yep.
And knowing that, like, okay, I don't know how to handle this, but I can call Dusty. Dusty might have an answer for it. AJ might have an answer for it. No matter what kind of service you're using for your network, whether it's like a Facebook page or, something different, you can put it on there, and within a couple hours, you're going to get some good responses. Mm-hmm. So we aren't in this alone. And I love the fact that that's what networking really does for us.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to be extremely transparent right now, because I think that you just said something that, and I feel like the Holy Spirit's like, Dusty, I dare you. And this has to do with AJ. So I think it makes sense. We had just come back, and I think this goes back into networking, Lynn. And because of the relationship I have with AJ, it was a Wednesday, and I had nothing to teach. I had nothing. I sat here and I was so frustrated and I was so broken. And I'm like, how do I have nothing to say? And I just text, and then God was like, text AJ. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, AJ's got it all together. Like, he's never had this problem.
It's not true, by the way.
He's just like, AJ's going to think I'm like, I am a terrible youth pastor. And God said, you don't have anything to write because you haven't asked yet. And so I just text AJ and I said, dude, I have nothing. And I hope AJ remembers this conversation because it was a big deal for me. And AJ, honestly, I gave him the topic, and I gave him the topic in the series, and I just had nothing for the series. And he goes, dude, this hits home for me. And it just was the right person. And he gave me a bunch of texts. And I'll tell you this, I didn't actually use any of AJ's input. But what it was that God needed me to be humble enough to text somebody, to use the people that he's brought in my life for something so sensitive, that I decided to tell him I don't know. And in that moment, it was the moment after AJ had texted me and I saw all this stuff, it gave me the springboard to go, oh my gosh. And it was like lit the fire to go off. And it was one of the best the sermons in the series. And that's not to tell a youth pastor, like, hey, wait to the last minute to write your sermon. Don't do that. Like, plan that stuff out. This was just happened to be a crazy time. And I want to say, like, that's so important. Like, you can't do that if you're not building relationships with people enough for you to be vulnerable in that, because it's like, it's so hard for us. And so, Lynn, I appreciate you saying that.
But I also think it was important for Dusty to hear, that's okay. It was important for Dusty to hear, like, as a youth pastor, been there, done that multiple times, went to a video. You know, nobody wants to admit that I did not plan my week well. I've not been abiding this week or whatever that looks like, right? Whatever took us away from that time we should have been preparing, or maybe just writer's block. I mean, I know Dusty was just struggling on that writer's block. Whatever the reason, we've all had that time where it's like, okay, throwing up the video, like skit guys, right now media, like whatever, access we have. It's like, tonight, guys, hey, we're going to do something different. I want to give you guys a different feel. And we're like painting this picture for the students. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Like they don't know that night we feel like failures or whatever that looks like. I mean, I've even had that. I've had a message ready to go. And the Lord's like, your heart's not there tonight. Like if you try to do this, you're going to take what I've prepared for something good. You're going to mess it up. So like, you got to do something different tonight. And like, I've had to learn, like, you know what, every once in a while, that's okay. Like, and it doesn't make me a bad youth pastor. And I think in that moment, Dusty needed to hear like, bro, you're not a bad youth pastor. You're going through something literally all of us have gone through. Lynn, I mean, what, in 30 years, maybe 100 times, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, whether it's teaching, coming up with a theme for a camp, one of my biggest struggles is like games, icebreakers, whatever you want to call it, Yeah, I think I have every single website bookmarked on my computer, and you go through it and you're like, oh, I can't find anything. This stinks.
Go ahead and send me those when you're done. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think with that, like, again, it's the year's been a revealer. And so we're moving into a new year here in a couple days. We're ending this year. We're probably going through our similar routines of years past, where we're doing 2020. We're doing year in reviews. We're thinking about, we're planning for the future. We're doing all this sort of stuff, and we're dreaming. Some of us are getting excited about it. Others of us are dreading. We're on that spectrum. So with all of this stuff that we've talked about, we're talking about 2021 now. What are you holding on to? What are you going like, hey, this right here is helping me prep for January 2021. I'm not even talking about the whole year, because in my mind, we got to think small, because this year, we planned for the whole year, and then things got flipped upside down 3 months in, and we went, okay, now what? So what if we think small? But what is it when we think small? I'm not talking about your youth group. I'm talking about you. So what are you holding on to? What is the thing that you're going, this was revealed in me, and this is what I need to open my eyes to, and God's revealing to me moving forward?
Man, relationships, once again, the more I look at it, the more it's just about being available for students, being available for my family, my friends. I think that's the biggest thing that 2020 has really shown me, and that I want to take forward into 2021. It's not about programming. It's not about events. It's not about all these other things. It's about taking the time to be there and to be truly available for people.
I think for me, one of the things that taking away from the pandemic for me personally, that God has revealed, is just the relationships in my life. And again, this isn't like a big network push, like go get in a network. But
sure,
the youth pastor network I'm in is just one of many areas of my life where relationships have been vital through the pandemic. And so whether it be, that conversation with that youth pastor, we were doing two different things and crying with each other, basically, whether it was that, or having a best friend that's next to me, and he's like, bro, are you abiding? He's like, I know what you're struggling with, and I know that this is such a hard season for you. Are you remembering what's important? Are you abiding? Like, what God teaching you? And there are days where he texts me. He's one of my best friends, and there are days that he texts me, and it's annoying. I'm like, man, quit calling me out, bro. Like, what are you doing? Knock it off. But in hindsight, I need it. I need it because I can get so busy in the having to plan and figuring out, okay, I don't even know what's coming up this summer, let alone in a month. But to be reminded, slow down. Are you abiding? Where is your heart? Are you keeping your heart with all diligence? Are you being the dad and the husband you need to be first? Because if you're not taking care of that, nothing else is gonna get done. Right. And so it's having those relationships in my life that keep me grounded. that they keep my eyes where they need to be when they need to be there. And so focus on my wife, being intentional with her, focus on my kids, not taking work home. And then when I am doing ministry, to be intentional, and to be relational. Going back to again, these relationships I feel is what God has used in my personal life to get me through all the craziness of 2020. Saying like, hey, I need you to teach for me. Or hey, I need you to watch camp so I can go back to the house without anyone knowing, because we're getting ready to sell our house. I mean, that's a real story that happened this summer, because I was camp director and I was youth pastor and everything. And I went to one of my leaders and I said, I'm not telling anyone, but I'm going to go back home and check on the painters and everything else, because my wife is a superhero and she's at home doing it all by herself. Text me if anything's going on. But it's having those relationships in my life that God has shown me how important they are, whether it's accountability, encouragement, ideas. It's been my network. It's been my life group at church. It has been family that has sustained my being able to just have joy in life in a season that causes fear, causes anger, causes tears. It's just having those relationships in my life and the Lord reminding me it's where it's at. That's where.
Yeah, that's solid, because I resonate with that. My wife and I put on our calendar that we would hang out with friends every there was a day of the week that we always made it like, this day of the week we're intentionally seeking people out, because we can quickly be isolated in our own homes. We can quickly be isolated in our work, and it's healthy for us to have people that are outside of our work directly, who can speak into our lives. We can hear about what's going on with them. We can realize like, okay, cool. So maybe I don't have it as bad as I thought. They have it worse, and I can help lean, they can lean into me. I can lean into them, that sort of stuff. Figuratively speaking, unless you're finding somebody that is safe and not, spreading whatever. There was an attempt at a joke there, but it wasn't really happening.
No,
so I think let it go.
I think I think that, I'll say this, and we'll ask one more question and just to wrap it up with some hope. But I think that when I hear both of you say, what is something that you feel like has been exposed in you in relationships is it, I think that be if you're still listening and you're still here and you're finding yourself hearing this, maybe it's times that we have to ask God, do I have enough relationship capacity for people, for students, and for my family? And then what does that tank look like for each of them? And are we using that tank appropriately, in those areas? And that's preaching at myself. But I think that we have to really, really be able to measure that from 2020 going into 2021 is, what is our relational capacity tank for people? Because it's been drained a lot in 2020.
And I think to answer that question is to understand what those relationships look like. I know going into a lunch with this guy that he needs encouragement, that he's struggling, that he's, maybe he's medical, and he's seeing some of this craziness on the front lines, and he just needs to be built up. But sometimes it's like sitting down with somebody and just saying man, I'm struggling. And we become that guy that needs the encouragement, and not being afraid to make both of those things important. Yes, we are ministers, we are pastors, leaders, ministry leaders. We are called to invest. But guys, if we're not filling the tank and being intentional to fill that tank, then we're doing ourselves and those people that we're pouring into, we're doing both of them a disservice. And so, and just for Dusty and I in particular, there are days where me and Dusty's talking and I'm encouraging him, and there's days that he's like, bro, knock it off, you're doing great, and he's encouraging me. And so sometimes it's the same people, and roles can be reversed. So I just think being intentional on both sides of those.
It's good. Last question. Let's try to wrap this thing up. Is going into 2021, if someone's still sitting here and they're listening to this, what is something that you can say that you would want to help them find hope in moving into 2021?
I think it's the reminder, because again, a lot of people listening are going to be the youth pastors and the youth leaders, ministers. Even when circumstances change, for most of us, the call in our life did not. And hold on to that. I mean, that's the hope, is that, I had somebody a lot smarter and wiser than me before I wound up in this position. I was out of ministry, and very, very wisely, they told me, you don't have to be paid full time as a staff member to answer the call that God has placed on your life. And, I get it. It's easy for me to say, right? I'm a full-time youth pastor. I know you make fun of me, yell at me, whatever. But I've had a season. And I think the hope is holding on to the fact that, God, you've called me to something, and whatever that looks like, I'm going to be obedient. And just finding joy and finding hope in that call that we have, in whatever way it looks like for us to live it out.
Yeah, AJ, that's great stuff, man. For me, I draw hope going into 2021 from the wins. Since March, there have been so many wins. And as we've seen kids come back, I can point to this student or that student that has grown and has matured. I can point toward this leader or that leader that I've seen pushed and rise up to the challenge and become a better, stronger leader. I'm able to look at my family and I see how my son has grown through this difficult time, how my daughter has grown. My wife is actually a teacher at Demonte Ranch High School, and I see the work that she's putting in and how her love for students has grown and enhanced. And I look at our church, my lead pastor, who's fantastic, how he has encouraged me and the rest of the staff and been a great shepherd to us. So in the midst of these trying times, I'm able to draw hope from all the wins that I see.
Not to take over your job, Boston Dusty, but because I love that. That's awesome. But it's really easy for us to focus on what we think we're failing at. So Lynn, like what advice would you give? I mean, I've not been in ministry as long as you. What advice would you give for us younger guys to remind ourselves to keep focused on the wins?
Man, that's a great question. Probably journal it. I mean, if you're really struggling with it, you could try journaling, right? Keeping track of these types of things. Another way might be to highlight students via your social media stuff. I mean, that's just like, you have to do it then if you're taking their picture and telling their story on Instagram or whatever the case might be. When I run our leadership meetings each month with my adult volunteers, we go around the room and I make sure that each one of them talks about the highs and the lows, the middle school boys Bible study group, but when I'm able to hear those wins from those guys, because they're interacting with students that I'm not necessarily interacting with, that gives me that knowledge and that really empowers me.
That's awesome.
I think one more way to find a win is just to flat out just go, hey, I'm still standing. And like when we're like again, like Boss was saying, like aim small and miss small, right? So it's like I'm still standing, and like the fact of like my pastor and I were just talking about this the other day is that we looked back at 2020 and we're like, whoa, we launched certain things in a pandemic, like stuff that we just thought that we would have never thought we did, like. Go back to the small things of like, I stood today and then like last week we did this. And then when you start working backwards, instead of just going back to like starting here in this moment and going backwards, you're going to find wins a little bit more probably clearer than if you go like, okay, January 2020. Like if you start at January 2020, you're going to miss a lot. So like work back from where you're standing today and don't be afraid to put a win up there. That's a win for you. That doesn't mean that has to be a win for the next person. Like we can't compare wins and we can't compare losses. Like my win doesn't mean it's better than yours, and my loss like doesn't mean that, well, my loss is worse than yours. Like we shouldn't one up each other in pain either. Like it's like, just because it's a win or a loss to me doesn't mean that I can't put it on my list because it's not a win or loss for somebody else.
That's solid. That's awesome. Men, thank you. Thank you for sitting with us, taking the time out of your busy schedules to just share about the year and your life and what's going on in your context. Before we jump out of here, how can people connect with you? AJ, go first and share how people can connect with you. I don't know why I said that a couple times.
No, you're good. You're good. I think I'm probably most active via Instagram. So I'm on Instagram, people. It is at AJ Gonzalez, Gonzalez, IV, as in the fourth,
Nice.
My legal name is Armando Gonzalez the Fourth. So AJ Gonzalez is where I am on Instagram, and yeah, you can connect with me anytime. I love a passion the Lord has given me is talking to ministry leaders. I love it, and I love that I don't always have the answers, but I still love being the guy that can say, "Hey, let me pray for you." So yeah, I'd love to connect with anyone listening.
Hey, well, my phone number is, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm a boomer, so you can find me on Facebook, Lynn Ault II, Reno, Nevada. I'm also on Twitter, Lynn Ault. My Insta is also the Rebellion. So the name of the youth group here is the Rebellion. So the Rebellion, and that's also what we are on like TikTok and stuff. But really, if you just want to connect, man, you can email me, Lynn Ault at encounterhope.org. I'd love to connect with anybody anyway.
Awesome. We'll drop all that stuff in the show notes in the description, so that people don't have to like write it all down. They can just click on it. Before we bounce out of here, Dusty, are you a junior or a second? I feel like I'm not lining up with these guys. They've got namesakes.
I'm not. I went completely.
Right.
There's not another Dusty out there. I wasn't definitely named after anybody like that.
Awesome.
My boy is the fifth, so that man's got he's gonna be struggling.
That's awesome. Well, man, thank you for taking the time. This was awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate you guys.
Well, I hope you feel encouraged after that conversation. I hope that you feel encouraged in the sense that you're not alone. Maybe there's some things that you heard from Lynn and from AJ as they were raw and they were honest. Maybe you heard some things that resonated with you, that felt very similar to the feelings that you've experienced at some point this year, maybe even this week. I'm encouraged by it. I'm encouraged because Lynn and AJ both didn't know each other before this, and they resonated with the things that were being shared. You can see them if you're watching. Small plug to our YouTube channel. That you could see them nodding in agreement when they were sharing what they were feeling. We all are feeling that way. Many of us are feeling that way. Leading in ambiguity is exhausting. It takes so much energy because of the levels of thought and intentionality it takes for us to think through before we announce a decision or make a decision. We're all feeling that. So you're not alone. Make sure that you know that when you leave here, that you're reminded of that from today. As we were talking, I was reminded of a illustration that has been shared with me in the past, and it's something I've held on to pretty frequently this year. The expression or this illustration is the example that was given to me was that many times we as leaders we attempt to be carpenters. And the reason why we do that is because we've built something. We had figured out something, how to build it. And we had worked, if you think about a carpenter, they're working wood, they're working with this tough product and material, and they're trying to form it into something that people will then see it and call beautiful. Many of us as leaders, we do that. We've done that. We've worked this material that is tough and we've turned it into something that is good, that people praise us for. And so then we try to replicate that, and we work it and work it and work it. And that's our goal, is to just replicate it. Well, it exhausts us because it's hard work. Well, the opposite of that, or not the opposite, but an alternative route is being a gardener. See, a gardener goes out and they tend to the land, they tend to their little plot, and they work it and they make sure that everything is correct, and they get all these things in line, and they plant seeds and they get them going and everything. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the product that comes is not a result of their doing. The conditions are on the gardener to make sure that everything is right. But at the end of the day, the flower is not in their possession, because they could do everything right and no flower. I was challenged, I was invited to think this way often, because the gardener creates the conditions for things to flourish and for things to happen. And ultimately, the gardener holds their hands up, palms up, and just releases control of what is to come. And all they've said is, I've done what I'm supposed to do. And the rest we have to leave up to God. My invitation to you is that you approach this next season, even just January, with that. I can tell you from firsthand experience that things have become a little bit lighter, that my worries, my frustrations have diminished. They haven't disappeared, they've diminished. But I'm not holding on to things so tightly. I'm not demanding that it be mine. I'm holding it with palms open, expecting and knowing that it might be taken away from me at some point. I believe that's what God calls us to do, because he says that tomorrow isn't promised. The breath that we breathe is borrowed breath. I believe that if we approach every day, if we approach every situation with our palms up and we hold things lightly, and are grateful that we get to hold it, knowing that it might be taken away from us, we'll live a little bit lighter life, and we'll live with a little bit less stress. And I'm not trying to diminish the hard times, because we've had hard times. That's my invitation to you right now. And in this season, in this Christmas time, in this New Year's time, and as we're moving forward, I invite you to try to posture yourself that way. Ask God for that strength and that vision to see that and what that looks like. I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for your time. I'm thankful that you've allowed us to be in your ear space, and you've listened to the words that have been spoken. All of this is all to bring glory to God and bring a community together. And so my prayer for you is that you find rest in this season, that in the craziness of all this time, that you find joy, and you see it and you experience it firsthand. Now, if you are unfamiliar, there are people that are all around your community who want to be in community with you. Even if it's socially distanced community, they want to be in connection with you. We have a way for you to find them. You can go to our website and search your area and find networks and communities of leaders all around you who are meeting, who want to be in community with you. I encourage you to find somebody to lean on, because relationships are key during this time. They are more important than anything. All of that to say is, again, we want you to be in this for the long haul. So, as a reminder, as we end, the more we pour into ourselves, the more we can pour out to others. Until next year, until the next episode, peace, blessings.